Welcome back to Baron's New Vegas Gun Guide, and on this episode we are looking at one of the most retro-futuristic guns in New Vegas, the 12.7mm pistol. Now those who have played know that there's also 50 caliber ammunition in New Vegas, as well as this 12.7mm used by this gun. Those that fancy themselves multicultural mathematicians also know that those are the same diameter. Now, J.E. Sawyer's reasoning was simple. To keep confusion low, he separated the two guns 1mm, 1 inch. And the 12.7mm ammo is supposed to be 50 Action Express by his own admission. 50 Action Express, most well known as being what the Desert Eagle is normally chambered in for at least its larger powers. Looking at the bullet model, you can confirm that it is a flat-headed round, which is a hallmark of pistol rounds. The 50 Action Express is very powerful, just shy of the much larger 4570, but way below, say, the 500 Smith & Wesson round, which is the most powerful pistol round that's at least commercially produced. But the predecessor to the 12.7mm pistol used an even more powerful round. Now back in Fallout 1 and 2, there was the 14mm pistol, whose design was taken almost completely wholesale for the 12.7mm pistol. The main difference being that the 14mm pistol had a straight box mag in front of the grip. The 12.7mm is obviously lacking this because its ammunition can fit in the grip of the pistol. Now, back in Fallout 1 and 2, sadly, due to only having AP rounds, the 14mm pistol really failed to deliver it to its impressive diameter and power, only doing half as much damage as it really should have. Now, as to probably why we don't have a 14mm pistol in New Vegas and instead have a gun that uses the 12.7/50 Action Express ammunition, is due to Joshua Sawyer himself, who, being very knowledgeable about guns and ammunition, decided to use the more realistic rounds, being that they are made, versus this 14mm round that is purely fictional, having never been made or produced or used in any official capacity. There was one final thing we can say about the comparison between the 14mm and the 12.7mm pistol, which is, due to their very similar design, we must assume that the same manufacturer made it, which we only get in Fallout 1 and 2, which is that SIG made the 14mm pistol, so it would be reasonable to assume that the 12.7mm pistol was also made by SIG. Now, despite all this ammo talk, how does this futuristic lead slinger do against its cowboy competitors, which really corner the market on large powder-packing pistols? Well, at 40 damage, it is 4 points more than the humble 44 Magnum, but a whopping 18 points below the hunting revolver. But with a rate of fire almost double the hunting revolver at 2.8 shots per second, it stands proud with a DPS of 110, around 30 points higher than the hunting revolver. With a reload of 1.7 seconds and a magazine capacity of 7, it has a sustained DPS of 66.5, which is quite respectable. Now, potentially surprisingly, this weapon is excellent for VATS. At only 17 AP per shot, which is no more or less than any of the other standard semi-automatic pistols, it has an efficiency of 2.4 damage per AP, which is exceptional, especially when you consider that it is not a fully automatic weapon, it's just semi-auto. Now, the fact that it is very good for VATS is very helpful because, not surprisingly, it has very high spread due to its large round. At 1.1, it's just as bad as a modified 10mm SMG. Now, that means that any VATS accuracy perks you get will become very good and may increase this gun's usability by a lot. But if you can't use VATS, and if you're stuck with just the iron sights, it's not so bad. It has a very visible V-notch and post-iron sights, nice and readable. But that being said, the curve of the slide can really make it off-putting to use. It kind of messes with your depth perception just a little bit. Now we move on and finish up the stats with its crit percent multiplicator. Now, considering it's a loud and a single-shot weapon, it has a fairly standard multiplier of ×1. And it only does a simple doubling of damage. But 80 damage is nothing really to scoff at. It's just a shame you can't use it in a holdout location as your powerful backup. Now, for the pleasure of owning it, you'll have to shell out some caps. 4,000 of them. Now, that's quite the price, especially for a gun that's only as durable as the 10mm pistol. Obviously, SIG didn't much care for the longevity of their pistols 200 years on. Now, for the ammo, the 12.7mm is costing the same as 44 mag, which sounds great because they're comparable in damage. 3 caps for standard, with 7 caps for the hollow point, which boosts the damage by 75%, up to a physical damage of 70, with the same 3 times DT on enemies, and 3 caps for each hand-loaded JHP, for 65% more damage, which results in 66, and only raising enemy DT by 100, or times 2. A great option, really. Now, something that it shares with the 10mm pistol and the 44 Magnum is that it has mods, although in this case it's only one, a silencer, which sells for 1,750 caps. Now, while it is a fragile gun, and that is an expensive price to pay for a silencer, the knockout power of a hollow point loaded 12.7mm pistol on an unarmored target can reach 280 if you have the requisite 50 gun skill, and no more, with no other perks on a sneak attack. Now, if you have more guns or a variety of perks, that damage can go even higher. And that is a knockout blow in one shot. And you get 395 of them from fully repaired. Now, sadly, outside of GRA, there's not a unique variant, especially one with more durability. Now, as to where you can find normal ones, the Bloodborne Cave has one if you can get past the legendary Night Stalker. Hoover Dam NCR soldiers can carry them, Legion in the Fort, and Great Khans in Red Rock, basically the factions in their faction location. Fiends might also carry some real broken up ones. And of course, the Gunrunners and Night Taurus sell them, and a interesting one is the Brewer's Beer Bootlegging, can sometimes have one in the basement gun cabinet. And those are the requirements for owning it. But what about for using it? So it weighs 4.5 pounds, which is not a debilitating amount of weight and is quite reasonable. It requires a guns of 75 and a strength of 7 to use, practically. Which, that's asking a lot. You probably won't be using it as a sidearm if you're playing an energy weapons character, or if you don't want to bother maxing out your gun skill. Now, for if you should use it at all, it's a glass cannon. Its durability is weak, but it is powerful. But it's also expensive. But it also pumps out the most DPS from any ballistic pistol in the base game. Really, more than any other gun I've talked about up until this point. This gun is solely based on how much money you can invest in it. Because if you can't afford to keep it repaired, there's no reason to have it. But if you can, you will be delighted by how effective it can be. Now, with some parting words, I'd like to thank you for your patience on this episode. It's been a lot harder than usual to get it out for some reason. And I'd like to thank all the mods I'm using. I will include, or at least answer your questions about the mod list. It's kind of long, and I kind of forget what some of them do. In this mod, we do have Hitman's animation mods, who has made some for weapons I've reviewed previously, and you should go check those out. They're very nice. I'm using an inspection mod as well. Requires a lot of NVSEs in order to actually get to work, but overall, very good. Would highly recommend them. And then, of course, I'm using World of Pain for all these locations that I'm filming at, simply because there's a lot of enemies. Normal New Vegas is kind of slim on them in some areas. Thank you very much.